Um, Interviews. So now we're going to jump to interviews, and we only have about 20 minutes left. So I'm going to try to go through this rather quickly because I think most of us know a lot of this is common sense. A couple of things that I want to talk about specifically for the interview is to tell your students to change their voicemail greeting on their phone. I always survey my kids, and I would say 80% of them have never even set up their voicemail on their phone because they don't use it. They don't talk on the telephone. But an employer may call them to set up an interview. They're not going to recognize the number. They're not going to answer their phone because they've been taught not to answer numbers that they don't recognize. And it's going to go to voicemail, or they're in the middle of class or whatever. You have to teach them how to set up their voicemail. And I specifically don't teach them on what their device. I just give them examples of what an appropriate voicemail is. Hello, you have reached Trudy Sullivan. I'm unable to answer the phone right now. Please leave a message. That's simple. And if you demo that for students, if you give them examples of what appropriate voicemail greeting is, they'll be like, oh, okay. And again, you would be surprised how many students don't have voicemail set up. Also to check spam. And then again, to check their voicemail often. And of course, use a professional email address, 1-800-chaseshotchicks at yahoo.com is probably not something they should have. And most of them know that, but it's always a good reminder. And then I like to go over things to do before, dress professionally, arrive 10 to 15 minutes early, talk about leaving the phone in the car. And I talk a lot about sort of their phone addiction and how bad it looks when they're waiting for someone to come out and greet them for an interview and they're on their phone texting. And I tell them, if you have such an addiction to your phone that you can't shut it, that you can't leave it alone, leave it in the car while you're in your job interview. Or shut it down. Don't just silence it, shut the whole thing down. From the moment you walk into the door of where you're going to interview till you walk out the door, you should never check your phone. And they all look at me like I've come from some space world. And then also to know where they're going, to research the company. I always tell my kids, go out the day before, find out where it's located. I teach in a kind of a rural community, Granite Falls. They may not know that if they have to drive to Everett or Seattle, that they may have to pay for parking. And where do you have to park? And then how far do you have to walk to the building and so on. So those kinds of tips, that kind of really practical stuff that we tend to forget when we talk about job interviews. And then, of course, how to shake their hands. We go over that. We talk about speaking slowly. We talk about body language and making eye contact. I actually have them practice. Now, I haven't been able to do it in COVID, but when we're here in person, I have them shake hands. We make eye contact. And we talk a lot about how communication is only 7% of what you say. 93% of communication is nonverbal. The tone of your voice, your physical impression, posture, gestures. I teach them the lava trick, that the back of your chair is lava. So when you're sitting in an interview, you don't want to lean back on your chair. You need to be sitting straight up, that kind of stuff. There's this great YouTube channel of this college professor who does a lot of videos about this. It's super fun. I gave you the link. We're not going to watch them, but he sort of goes through different communication styles and things like that. So those are kind of fun to look at. He uses college students in them a lot. So I think the kids kind of can relate to it a little bit better.
Trudy, could you just take a look at the chat? The question is, if a student has had no work experience, is it okay for them to include their references on their resume to fill up the space?
I would prefer, personally, I would prefer volunteer experience is fine. I would rather see that. If they have to put the references, I guess if that's the only thing they have. But then I try to have my kids dig deep. You mowed the lawn for your neighbor. You don't, you work the food drive. You worked concessions. Things like that. Anything that was even volunteer experience where you can list soft and hard skills.
Now, do you see the other question? If this school that they're referring to has 90%,
I see that. I don't
Yeah.
know. And as far as this video on the YouTube regarding communication, I haven't watched all his videos, so I don't know how much diversity are in his videos. The video that I showed you on the pbs.org, that one actually talks about a woman of color who actually started her own business. And there's a lot of diversity, positive diversity messages in there. So that PBS one that I sent earlier is really good. I really enjoyed that. I just didn't want to show the whole thing because it was 8 minutes.
And of course, Trudy, as the teacher, you've probably had many students that have had no work or volunteer experience. So what do you recommend that they do? I know you say dig deep, but what are some things that students are putting on there?
Soft skills, and you really go to the soft skills, right? You really have to go to soft skills. And even maybe go to creating that statement on your resume at the very beginning. Instead of an objective, I would put a statement that says, you know, I'm looking for my first job and I don't have a lot of technical skills, but I have skills, these soft skills. Also academics, put their academic classes on there. Because especially CTE classes, of course. And then even if they took Spanish, they took language classes, technology classes. Most of our kids know how to use some software. Maybe they like to edit videos at home and they do YouTubing, they live stream their Twitch. Put that, you know how to live stream, you know how to use OBS software. Like there's a lot of stuff our kids know how to do. They just don't know how to like break it down to a skill on a resume. So what are their hobbies? And what are they doing with their hobbies? Do I recommend starting this at middle school? I actually don't. I think it's overwhelming for students to start it in middle school. It makes them feel inadequate. That's my experience. In fact, I don't know why we have 9th grade students or 8th grade students starting their resume. Could be because it's part of the high school and beyond requirement for graduation, but it really starts to become applicable in 10th, 11th and 12th grade. Kids have stuff to put on their resume in 11th and 12th grade usually. But that's just my opinion. And I want to quickly just go, and I don't have a lot of time. Of course, talking about dressing the part. This is a big sensitive issue with our kids. And I give them examples. I have this fun slideshow where we sort of criticize what people are wearing. People like to do that. It's super fun. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time about it. Most of us know what professional attire looks like, but our kids don't. And they also want to say, this is what I hear, but that's not who I am. I'm not that person. That's not how I dress. That's not me. And I'm like, well, you could eliminate yourself by that, once you get the job, you can be more about your self-expression, but don't eliminate yourself simply because you choose self-expression over sort of practicality. And then final impressions, again, teaching them to stand up, say their name, say thank you, and shake the hand of the person. A few tips about changing job verbiage so they know what the right thing is to say. Instead of they were fired, maybe it was better opportunity, seasonal employment. So just positive verbiage that students can use. I didn't like the people I work with. That's why I quit. Well, maybe you could say you had better opportunities. And then Kylie's going to talk really quick. We only have about 10 minutes left. She's going to talk really quick about what employers are looking for at the end of the day in jobs.